Hello, everybody. I'm back again. This is a second example of the kinds of issues that emerge in workshops I lead for supervisors. In this case, the workshop will be for Leading Edge later on in December.
All right, Larry, as you've written, supervisors are caught in the middle between senior administration or boards and frontline staff. How can supervisors best deal with these difficult situations?
This is one of the issues that always comes up at a workshop. And supervisors at every level often feel caught between the level above them and the level below them. For example, a new policy creates a negative reaction on the part of staff, or staff is upset about not being consulted about a change, maybe a change in hours, a change in work rotation, a change in policy on how to deliver services, etc. Because staff is upset, they will often turn to their supervisor. Let's take a first supervisor in the middle, a supervisor of frontline workers. And in effect, what they're asking, even though it may be indirect, is which side are you on? Are you with us or are you with them? The problem for the supervisor is the administrators ask the very same question. Which side are you on? You're part of administration. You ought to be with us. Now, it may not be asked as directly as that, but it's implied. This is why supervisors often feel caught in the middle. It is not uncommon when staff morale is down for negative individuals or internal leaders to emerge at staff group and staff meetings. These are people who play that role all the time. The ones who complain, the one who are constantly negative, the one who's been around for a long time and says the more things change, the more things stay the same. And this person emerges whenever staff morale is down because they feel the administration is not paying attention to them. And of course, the supervisor often experiences this person as, quote, the enemy, the deviant member, the person who's making it hard for them to do the job. I'm going to suggest that's often a misunderstanding, that often someone like this emerges when there's a conflict between staff and the administration, and they're actually voicing the underlying issues, the ones that people talk about in the hallway before the meeting, but not necessarily during the meeting. So what I think often happens is that supervisors make the mistake of siding with the administration if they're part of, or siding with their staff, and sometimes they do it depending on whether they agree with the policy or don't agree with the policy. The position I take on being in the middle is that it's crucial not to take sides, and that you have a job to do no matter what the policy is, and no matter whether you agree with the policy or not. Your job in my model is a mediator between the administration and staff, helping staff understand what's going on for administration and helping administration understand the impact on staff. Now, to do that, you have to develop a good working relationship as a supervisor, and in the workshop we'll talk about that in a lot more depth. Rapport, for example, or a relationship where staff say they can tell you anything on their mind, they can risk their mistakes and failures as well as their successes. A relationship where staff say, in effect, that they think you are as much with them and caring about as much as them as you do about your job and about the agency itself. I'm going to argue that that relationship has to be developed with both sides, the administration and with the staff, and that your job is to be in the middle and to help that point of conflict in any way you can. That's what your job is, the functional role. And you can't do that job if you're identifying with one versus the other, or agreeing with a policy or disagreeing with the policy. You can share your views, they're important, but that doesn't change your particular role. And why I like to give this example is that because it shows the supervisor making a mistake the first time this comes up, not really understanding the role of that, quote, deviant member. And by the way, the deviant member plays that role in a staff group because they've played that role all their lives. Every class they've been in, everywhere they've been. In other words, they've learned to be in that role. And it's not like the staff group has a meeting outside of the meeting and says, look, we're going to need a deviant member. Can anybody handle it? And they volunteer. But it's happening almost as if that's what's happening. So I've chosen an example where there is, quote, this deviant member. And I'm going to argue this person is the ally, not the enemy. And the other thing I'm going to argue throughout the workshop and right now is that good supervision and good practice is making mistakes all the time, learning from the mistakes, correcting them, and coming back and making more sophisticated mistakes. So I'm using an example of a supervisor who comes back. I had explained the meaning of the cutbacks. That was the issue. They were cutting back and they were losing workers. Why our department had to take its share and had asked the staff if they could come up with some ideas of how to make do with less and still maintain our service. I pointed out that I knew it would not be easy. During my explanation, Frank sat with a smirk on his face as if to say, "Here it comes." I knew he was angry, so I just avoided his look. A few people asked some questions. There was some silence. Then Lou made a suggestion for a minor cutback in his area. I thought that was helpful. Frank jumped in and said he thought the discussion was a waste of time. I was angry at his cutting off what I thought was the beginning of a good discussion. I said, "I'm sorry you feel that way, Frank. It's not a very constructive attitude. I don't think you're being helpful, and I'm sure the others in the department feel the same way." Lou said, "I don't like this either, Frank, but we are just going to have to live with it." Frank was quiet for the remainder of the discussion, which, although lethargic, did produce some suggestions. This supervisor had a chance to present this example at a workshop I was doing, and we did some thinking about the analysis of the process and also how we could come back. And so I'm going to give you his follow-up. This is the next staff meeting. I began by saying I don't think we really leveled at the last meeting. When Frank said the discussion was a waste of time, that's the supervisor speaking, I felt on the spot, so I put him off. I didn't admit how uncomfortable the whole idea of talking to you about the cuts had made me. I call that the supervisor sharing their own feelings. I suspect many of you probably agreed with Frank. Is that true? This was the crucial piece. So instead of Frank being seen as the outsider, the enemy, the supervisor was admitting or acknowledging that he was actually expressing views that might be held by other people in the group. Lorraine said she thought across-the-board cuts were unfair. The fact is, many other departments had fat in them. We all knew it, yet each department was being treated equally in the cuts. I was surprised by how strongly she said this. She was obviously very upset. Joan jumped in and said she thought they were being penalized for having done a good job of cutting the bone to the bone last year. There was no recognition of the particular impact that across-the-board cuts would have on us as compared with other departments. If the administrator had any guts, he would set a procedure for evaluating exactly where the cut should go instead of across the board. And so on and so on. Now we're having not an illusion of work, which we had the week before, but real work, with people saying what they really think and feel at the meeting, not waiting until after the meeting or in the coffee shop. As Joan was speaking, I was beginning to wonder what I had opened up. How was I going to deal with this? I shared that with staff, and Lou suggested that we, that means the whole staff group, might be able to make a case if given the chance that this cut was unfair. He asked if I would consider setting up a meeting with the administrator. I told him I could do that, although I didn't know if it would help. After all, we had to realize he was also under pressure from other departments. Frank said, "That's what he gets paid for." We all laughed, and I said, "I guess that goes for me as well." I'm not going to continue in the short, brief excerpt, but there's also the excerpt where the supervisor meets with the administrator and tries now to communicate to the administrator that supervisor will be an ally for the administrator in helping the administrator meet directly with staff. So what's the point? The point is, when you're caught in the middle, that is exactly where you belong. The problem is understanding what your role is, developing a relationship with your staff so they see you as a source of support for them, and developing the relationship with your administration so they see you as that support as well. And then doing the work your job was set out to do, helping the communication in large complex agencies where everyone, administrators as well as staff and clients, feel under stress. When we have the workshop, we'll go into some other examples of how to play that role of being with staff and administration at exactly the same time. That's the end.
Thank you so much, Larry, for meeting with us today. We look forward to seeing you on December 4th and 5th for the essential skills of supervision and staff management.